Howdy folks, I hope you're well. Welcome to everybody joining in with us. We have got people online and we are ready to go. So, welcome, like I said. Despite the rumours, I am here. I'm still here. I'm going nowhere. RPI Live TV, 8 o'clock Monday evenings. Here this week, as always. Here next week and the week after. Going nowhere. So despite whatever rumours I've heard about myself leaving the pigeon sport, despite hearing RPI is going away, that is false rumours, not happening, folks. Some will be pleased to hear that, some won't be. All I care about is the people that will be pleased to hear I'm not going anywhere. Now, you may have noticed something different about me. Yes, I've got a younger, smoother complexion, but not in addition, just in addition to that, I've had a haircut. And good Gabby has cut my hair. And limited resources on lockdown. And these were the items that were being used. This is a hair clipper that we actually use for our golden retriever. And I have to say, I think she's done a great job. And I tell you what, it feels a hell of a lot better to have a haircut and looking somewhere near normal than I did a couple of days ago. Although I do, you won't be able to see it, I do have a tan line because I've been working outside weekend in the garden and what have you, and I've got a really bad tan line now I've had my hair cut. So there we go. I'm going to say hello to a couple of people and then we'll get on into the show. We've got a guest for you tonight. We've got a great guest, somebody that I don't know that well, but the little I know about them, I've got a great deal of respect for. First of all, though, let's say hello to everybody that's tuning in. Mickey Hessian's tuning in on YouTube. Hope you're well. Barry Rogers, I'm doing all right, thank you, Barry. Lorraine Butler's tuning in. Fabian Lord says, Gabby says, can you cut her hair next with the clippers? That would be a sight to see. Mosaic KV Stud, only started watching you over the last couple of weeks, been catching up on previous shows, enjoyed the Blackpool show. Thank you very much to hear that. That's on YouTube. Timothy O'Brien, I hope you're well, Timothy. I'm going all right, thank you. Shian Martin, Sean Crocker, you might like if you're looking happier upwards and onwards. Thank you very much for you to say so. So we've got a lot of people tuning in. As I said, we've got, how many have we got? We've got about 120 people on at the moment, which is good. We've got Thomas a lot watching, Simon Woolley, Richard Butler, Maxine Stevenson, Neil Gibson, Peter Curran, David West, Freddie Bannister, Lost Season Lamb. Simon Woolley picked up that her hair's been cut straight away. Thomas Smith, Maxine Stevenson, Mark Rigby, Stephen O'Brien, Mark Espadon, David Beasley, Brian Boggins, David Lawrence, Kev Parsons, Darren Dayson, Mark Finley, Richard Chambers is watching, Brian Perry, Melvin Balls, Winky O'Boyle, Errol Flynn, Gary Smith, Alan Cowart, Frank Nabig, Stephen Mulger, Clive Delaney, Thomas Murray. Alan Cowart says evening. So we've got a lot of people on. Thank you for everybody watching. So let's get into the show. Before I introduce you to our guest this week, just a couple of things. As you know, 2 weekends ago, I had some pretty serious, horrible, stressful things happened. I put out some CCTV. I'm not talking about it anymore because this is a positive show. I'm not talking about anything negative in any way, shape or form. And we're very much looking forward and not back. But thank you to everybody that has supported me, Gabby and Zandy, in the last week or so. It means a great deal. Gabby had a fellow pigeon flyer send her flowers and chocolates. Zandy has had some lovely young birds sent to him from Andy Pereira. He's been pledged other young birds as well. I myself have had an offer of a great pair of long distance pigeons as well, which is great. And it just shows you that the mass majority of people in the pigeon sport are great and lovely people. So what else have we got to talk about before we get on to our guest? By the way, all syndicate refunds have been refunded for the syndicate that I was running. Everybody now has a refund. This weekend I spent in the garden chopping up a shed ton of wood, getting more space created for the lofts and the aviaries to be sorted out and into. I haven't finished the loft yet. Was using the good weather outside to be outside as much as possible, because the reality is the lofts, the work that needs finishing in the loft is mainly inside stuff as well. So yeah, we're getting there. And let's crack on. Now, we have a guest. I have known of this guest for a while. And I like this guest a lot. And I'll tell you why I like them, because they seem very nice, normal people. And what I mean by that is there's no pretense with them. They run a very successful family pigeon stud. That's the other thing. Their family's completely involved in their business. And I've said it before, actually, a couple of times, that I've got a lot of time, although I don't know them at all very well, I've got a lot of time for what they do and what they're about, because they are just very nice, normal people, like I said, with no pretense. So let me welcome to the show, Mr. James Cook. Let me get James on now. James, how are you?
Yeah, good evening, Mark, and good evening, everybody that's watching. Great to hear the figures that are on tonight to listen to this this evening that we're going to talk about.
Well, you've got 152 people currently watching, James.
Oh, well, that's better than one, which is all I was expecting.
No, not at all. So, like I was saying before, we don't know each other very well at all, but I commented on the Blackpool the weekend after the Blackpool show, after I did some coverage from up there, that I got a lot of time for you guys, because you're very normal in the best sense of the word. There's no pretense. You run a family business. The family's completely involved in your business, in Tumley Lofts Stud, and you're just nice people that help as much as you can whilst running a business, doing the best you can.
Yeah, I mean, thanks ever so much for that, and very kind words. But yeah, that's who we are, and that's what we try to be, just honest at what we do, and try and help the sport in as best way as we can. And obviously, it's our living as well. But what a great way to make a living out of something you enjoy so much. And we get to meet plenty of people every year, old and new. Great to see the faces at different shows and different venues, and meet new faces too, like yours. We had a brief encounter at Blackpool and in Portugal, and it's a great family of pigeon fanciers we've got in this sport, and yeah, it's nice to interact with everybody when we can, and do the best we can for them as well.
This in no way, shape or form is a promo for your business, but you are in the business of pigeons and pigeon sport, so people know that may not have seen you. Obviously, we have people from all around the world watching. How long have you been going? Just tell us, 2 minutes about your business, how long you've been going, what you've been doing, your background, what the stud's about, what you keep, and what have you. I mean, like I said, we're not looking at this as advertising, because we're talking about something, just so you know, that I had never heard of before. We'll come on to that in a minute. But yeah, just tell people, for perhaps who don't know you outside of the UK, a little bit more about you and the business and the family.
Yeah. I'll run through it just quickly, because it all adds to the story of what we're going to talk to in a minute anyway. So I'm a second generation pigeon fancier. My father's 82, and he started this pigeon stud in 1984. And prior to then, he kept pigeons since the age of 12, and only was out of the sport when he had to do national service. Other than that, he's been in racing pigeons his whole life, and I've been bred into it and been in it my whole life as well. So yeah, I took over the stud a few years ago now, partially because of Dad's age and not wanting to have all the work involved with the stud, and it suited the timing with me as well, having an operation on my knee. I was a builder, electrician and builder. Prior to that, I was a research technician at a research facility near here on dairy animals, and basically have grown the stud since then, which it's been had an interesting time in the years it's been going, and but you know, always looking to build on what we got, and this is what's led to the story tonight, actually really having two parts of the pigeon world come together, and obviously us having a conversation, you and me, Mark, a few days ago, and getting interest.
So this is how it happened. I occasionally message James, and James messaged me last week offering me his support and words, kind words, and I said it'd be good for a chat, and that's what we had, because I know James helps out many new starters. He gives away more pigeons every year to good causes and than he perhaps should. And we had quite a long conversation. And in the spirit of, we need to change this sport, this is my words, this sport needs to change, the numbers don't lie, all of that stuff you've heard me talk about before. We got to talk about that. We talked about a few things, and then James said something, and I maybe I am embarrassed. Maybe I shouldn't be to say that I'd never heard of this before. So James, tell the audience what you started talking about, and I didn't know about.
Yeah, I mean, like I said to you before, no need to be embarrassed, because I didn't know much about the sport. I had heard of it, but until recently, a couple of years ago, I hadn't really been involved with it. And I had a guy come to us and looking to buy pigeons, not unusual, but he wanted a sprint pigeon to put in with the pigeons that he got his own himself, which again is not unusual. But the interesting side of it was he was a person that races milers. And when he mentioned the word miler, I understood what he done, the sport that was about, but that was about it. Other than the title of miler racing and it going on, I never knew anything about it at all, and got chatting to him just the same way as what we did on the phone the other day. Obviously, my interest sparked, and a few thoughts ran through my mind, and basically ended up swapping pigeons. So I ended up having some milers here, and he had one of our birds with him.
So we're talking about miler pigeons, M-I-L-E-R, right? And like I said, I'd never heard of this before, right? And I've previously said, for pigeon racing to go mainstream, you've got a big issue, and that issue is time. Whenever I've covered events, one-off races, you've got that, okay, I'm going live. This is an example. You've got, I'm going live now. I'm showing people around the audience. I'm showing the atmosphere, all of that stuff, akin to horse racing, let's say. And then you've got waiting. And you've got more waiting. Until, obviously you've gone live when you know the pigeons have gone up, but you've got a waiting time, and that waiting can be anything from, occasionally you get caught out, like down in Portugal, I got caught out. I was chatting to somebody and I got completely caught out. Then other times in the past, I've been waiting for 4 hours, and 4 hours is a long time when you've got hundreds of people watching you to fill. I've even had people telling jokes to fill. And this is one of the big barriers of pigeon racing. Now, I'd even said to Gabby before, I said, in the case of, let's say, a one-off race, it almost needs some smaller races. I said 20, 30 mile races to have people's interest before the final big race birds come in. So miler racing. So explain. So then James said miler racing. I questioned what he even said. I even had to ask how he was spelling it, just to double check. So explain what miler racing is, James.
Yeah, so basically there are variations of it, and over the years it's been refined down to racing over 1 mile or as close to. Very similar to what we normally do week in, week out. They race week in, week out, but only from 1 mile. But all points of the compass, the race program is set out at the beginning of the year, and you can train from the race points to get your birds to come home in the quickest possible time. And the great thing about this, as Mark's alluded to there, is the time it takes to start and complete a race. Obviously, with it being 1 mile, the actual pigeon race in that mile is a very short period of time. You're looking at under 50 seconds for what you could call professionals, the people that do it on a regular basis and know what they're doing about. I would be lucky to get one under a minute. I'd be very happy with that. But
isn't that funny what you've just said? Right, the professional. This is, we talk about sprint pigeon racing over 50 miles or plus, what have you. Right now, you're bringing it right down to like the 100 meters equivalent in athletics. You know, a professional will get one in at 50 seconds. You'd be happy to get one in a minute. A 10-second difference. This is a different ball game.
Oh yeah, definitely, indeed. And you know, there's so little known about the sport within what we call pigeon racing, and I think that's where some of the sport's gone is losing a trick, really. Pigeons and pigeon racing should be considered as a whole when you're talking about the general public. The fancy side of pigeons is just as important, the same as what crufts is. You've got working animals and you've got fancy animals, you might as well say. But the same with the sport here. But this side of the sport that we're talking about now, I think has a great appeal because it fits in with modern life. And nobody's got time or not nobody, people that we want to bring into the sport, which are new to pigeon racing, families or couples or anybody really, haven't got the time or don't want to spend the time at a weekend sitting in the garden, which we all enjoy doing, waiting for our birds to come home. They haven't got the time to do that, or they don't want to have the time to do that on a nice sunny day, and you've got the kids and you want to go down the beach, and the you know, husband or wife is in the garden, or the kids are in the garden waiting for the pigeons to come home. Okay, you can overcome that with ETS, people might say, but it's not quite the same as seeing your own birds come home. With this scenario, obviously, the race is all over and done with extremely quickly. The big difference between miler racing and pigeon racing as we know it is the birds are released individually. So there's only effectively one pigeon on the racetrack at a time. But most miler clubs were around about 10 lofts in what they call a paddock. So in you might as well say in a square or a circle, and the centre of that paddock is where the pigeons were timed to. So, for instance, we'll keep it at 10 because it's nice and easy. And so each fancier would be allowed to send one pigeon per week. So only one pigeon from each fancier in the actual race that day. The order of release would be randomised before the race takes place, so the same person isn't going first or last or in the middle or whatever. And then the birds would be released individually from a mile away. Obviously, back in the day, there were not so much technology as now, so you just have synchronized stopwatches, and they would know when they're going to release because they'd release on the minute, and then every 2 minutes or however they worked it out beforehand, the pigeons would be timed in as soon as the bird hit the floor. And the exciting thing about that, when you watch some of the YouTube videos, is the counting up from 40 seconds, because you know that 40 to 50 second barrier is the winning target, depending on the weather, obviously. But even in the worst conditions, the winning speeds are still very, very, very quick. And so if you've got 10 birds, 10 fancies all racing on the one day, it's 10 minutes for the birds, you might as well say, for the race to be over and done with. You've got the time before and the time after, but basically you're looking at half an hour for the whole start and finish of a race. Now, that condenses a normal pigeon race into 30 minutes. And to me, that is just, well, could be just as exciting as what I experience waiting for my birds on a race day, as we know it at the moment. But as we've talked about, and I've said to other people, I think this is a side of the sport that could really encourage and engage new people to the sport. Because as we were saying, Mark, even in this scenario with the new modern technology, you don't have to be there to see your bird come home. It could easily be done, but hopefully the excitement of seeing your own bird come home and the speed that it comes home in would be of interest to the majority of people taking part in it. So, I think it's a great way of engaging any age, whether they're retired, whether they're at school or anything. It's the time factor. We've taken that time factor away from normal racing, condensed it. And when you look at a lot of sports, look at cricket, look at rugby, they're all trying to reduce the time it takes for a match to be over and done with, because they realise people's attention spans or time available aren't as long as what they used to be. So they're not prepared to sit for an hour and a half watching a game of rugby, or whatever. Cricket, they're not prepared to wait 3 days for a result in cricket. There's plenty of examples out there of sports condensing the time it needs, or time it takes on a traditional sport to fit into modern day life. And modern day life isn't allowing normally the time to sit around in the garden waiting for pigeons.
Not normally, no.
No.
A couple of technicals on it. So the pigeon is timed into the middle of the circle or the square. So does that mean it doesn't actually? It's not the time it traps, as we would know.
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct. So no, the pigeon. I'll give you an example. Basically, the 10 birds are taken up to the race point. You might as well say, so a mile away, and the person that's going to liberate those or release those birds individually knows what order they're going to go in. He's already got that worked out on his sheet of paper. They actually release them by throwing the birds along the line of flight, you might as well say. So rather than just standing there and letting it fly out of the basket, the pigeon's picked up out of the basket. The time that the person actually throws the bird into the sky down the line of flight is the start time of it, and that's done on the synchronized watch back in the. And normally the fancier, the pigeon, the actual pigeon's fancier is at the other end. They only race cock birds, so it's a hen bird that they use, and I think I'm right in saying they mainly use tumbler hens because they're very regular laying and easy layers, so they lay every 10 days and can keep the cock birds, keep them ticking over. So you don't need a very big team of pigeons to do this either, because there are no losses. If there is a loss, you walk down the line of flight, and normally it's they've bashed into a hedge or a window or something like that, and you can just pick them up off the line of flight. Obviously, most of the time they're only just dazed rather than lost for good sort of thing. Then as the pigeon comes back again, in a lot of places you can actually see the majority of the line of flight. So the pigeon fancy is there shouting and screaming away, waving the pigeon's hen. As that's coming into the paddock area, which is generally not very big, they generally throw the hen to the floor to make the cockbird then dive down on top of the hen, and then that's when you time the pigeon as the cockbird or as your race bird hits the floor. Obviously, that's how it's been done traditionally. There could be alterations made to this system, depending on the area, depending on how perhaps it could be modernised a bit, and suit the different systems that could be used to encourage people. Either in schools, you could have a similar system, but obviously we'd trap them back to the loft in the school, because you could just have one loft in it. Every child, every person that's interested could say that, well, that's my pigeon, and race the whole loft week in, week out, but pigeon against pigeon, so person against person each week. So you can make alterations to the system as it stands, just to fit the scenario that we've got, because community areas, they could have one loft. You could have a managed loft, a loft manager with people owning different birds within the lofts. So rather than having a central area, you could trap them to a trap, or you could do it in the traditional sense of the center of the paddock, basically.
Well, there's so many different variations what it could be. I mean, it's fascinating to know the standard default way it has been. But then moving forward and bringing technology into it, there's a lot that could be done with it.
Yeah.
If you look at now, you've got obviously all of the birds went up singly.
Yep.
That's one big difference. Sorry guys, I'm just got an issue with my camera for some reason. It's frozen on me whilst taking a swig of Coke, which is not a great thing. So you've got the individual element to it. You've got the into the center of the ring, or of the square element to it. As you said, they could be trapped. There's so many different elements to it. Like we said as well, it doesn't necessarily have to be 1 mile. I think you said it was up to about 5 miles sometimes.
Yeah, I think, like I said to you on the phone, I'm no expert at this, and the guy that I've got all the information from and the videos as well that I've watched, this do not take me as the expert in this. There are people out there with plenty more expertise and knowledge on this, but I'm passionate at getting this forward, and the opportunities arisen to try and get this out to the wider public, pigeon public to start with, and then hopefully go from there. But yes, as far as I'm aware, there are racing particular clubs that used to race up to 5 miles in the same situation. I'm not entirely sure whether the same paddock would have had 5 mile races, 1 mile races, or 3 mile races, whatever it is, or whether it is whether that one paddock you was in was just 1 mile racing. I'm not entirely sure on that, but obviously, again, like we just said, in terms of what it could be used for now, as in getting it to the wider public outside the pigeon fraternity, it can be whatever it is, depending on your location. If the location's not ideal for 1 mile racing, because there are plenty of scenarios where you might not be able to park up a mile away. And
yeah, absolutely. But that's the thing with it. It's adaptable.
Yeah, very, very adaptable. And again, all the drawbacks that our sport has at the moment, and we don't, as pigeon fanciers, we don't see them as drawbacks because we're used to them. But many people are experiencing a lot of these drawbacks with the hawk situation. Most of these are overcome with this type of racing, because when you're only over a mile, the pigeons are doing such speed anyway, and they're out of the loft for such a short period of time when they're racing, they're not going to get hit. They're not going to get hit. You're not going to have the losses. So people coming into the sport aren't going to experience losses. They're not having to look after a massive team of birds. Some people can argue, well, I don't have a big team now, but when you look at the majority of fanciers, we know as a stud how the increase in size of teams, young birds and old birds, it astonishes me how big people's teams are. I mean, some of them are the size of us, and they're just a normal, what they consider a normal racing loft. And to me, I could never cope with this many birds as a racing loft. It's only this size because it has to be. But when you look at the people coming into the sport where they've never had experience of pigeon racing at all, the way that we race now, they're probably scared. And a lot of them are, about the number of birds that they seem to think they've got to keep. Well, in this scenario, you could keep a handful of pigeons. You could keep 10 cocks, so 10 pairs, absolute most. That's all you would need. Can get away with even less than that. The problem that there is now within the miler sport is the gene pool is shrinking, shrinking so small and so quickly that there isn't the gene pool to keep breeding specific milers around anymore, because
do you know what the milers were based on back in the day? No.
I mean, again, it's all to do with coal mines. So that's where the biggest population of milers were, or miler clubs. And I probably, well, not probably, I have a bit of information in my mind that suggests something, but I'm not entirely sure it's correct. So I'm not going to say it because I don't want to put false information out there. But I don't know what they've originated from over the years, but I can tell you, having them here, they are a different shape to any of the pigeons that we've got here and any pigeon that I've really ever seen. They are what we consider to be, what we base our sprint birds on, is very powerful upper front, across the shoulders and down to a narrow back. But really, in that respect, that's about as much similarity as they've got to our sprint families. I've got them flying out around here, not very many of them, but you can see the difference in shape between them flying around with my kit of normal race pigeons, we might as well call them, to the milers. And it's interesting. They have been developed over the years in a different way, but the dog's just trying to come and have a look now.
All right.
So yeah, there are differences that the visual differences when they're flying and when you see them in the loft, you can generally pick them out. But that doesn't mean we couldn't start with any old pigeon. But obviously, again, like we say, or said at the top of the show, really, the professionals would get them clocking at 40 something seconds, whereas I don't know what most pigeon fanciers would be.
It'd be fascinating to try it with racing pigeons as we've got them now and see what the differences are, because obviously that's a evolution of the miler strain, really, to where powerful upper body, narrow back, what we would class as a sprint pigeon, but this is like a super sprint pigeon. This is this is the elite of the sprint from a point of view of how short it is. What I like about this is that it's if you said to a member of the public that didn't know anything about it, how long do you think a pigeon race is over? What do you think? How long do you think a pigeon would race? A lot of people wouldn't realize that they kind of start at 50, 60, 70 miles. A lot of people would think that's a long way. When you then tell them they'll fly 500, 600, 700 miles occasionally, it blows their minds. So from a public point of view, it's not a lot of people, and I've seen a couple of people posting on here that they don't like the idea. Maybe some people, they haven't said this, but maybe some people don't think it's proper pigeon racing. Well, define what proper pigeon racing is because, you've got sprint people and the long distance will say, a 50 or a 60 mile race is not a proper pigeon race. And then you've got all these different opinions. But from a mass public point of view, this is great. From a race is over and done. Imagine, put it into a horse racing context for a minute. You could actually have 3, 4, or 5 races over an afternoon. You could potentially do that. You could have race 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different pigeons racing, not the same pigeon. There's so much potential, and like I said, you've not got the waiting around. When they know that the pigeon's gone up. Again, I'm just throwing ideas out. It wouldn't necessarily have to be all individual. It wouldn't necessarily have to be 1 mile. It could be a 5 mile race. It could be a single bird race. There could be a 20 mile race that's all 10 pigeons up together. It would be great to follow the tradition but get the tradition back, because there's not that many around now that do this. But it's turning it on its head to say a 1 mile race is done, like you said, from start to finish. You're done in half an hour.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that said to me before. It's not a proper pigeon race, and I think certainly if you went to the paddocks and said that out aloud to those fanciers when there were there's not very many viable paddocks around now, but if you even done it now, I think you might get shouted down. Just because it's 1 mile doesn't mean it's not a proper pigeon race. I can see what people are saying, but at the end of the day, like you said, it is totally true. The general public out there don't realise we race from France, or in this country from Thurso, or Dover from this end of the country 200 miles. They don't know. It makes no difference to them whether we're doing a 200-mile race. They would call that an extreme distance race if you ask them, or they probably wouldn't even say 200 miles, or they don't. Not saying they probably wouldn't. I've had loads of experiences with people outside of the sport, and they do think that we only fly very short distances, 10 miles at the absolute most. As soon as you say, well, I had an author, a very I could name drop here, but he's a very well-known actor, writing a story or writing a book about World War II, and he asked me, is it right that the pigeons were killed off on the Channel Islands because the pigeons could send messages back to this country? Can they fly that far? And I said, well, we would call that a sprint race. So that's that's just one example, and I think to poo-hoo this part of the sport just because of the distances, I think is an insult, because I think unless you've tried racing over a mile, which I haven't, I must admit, I've got the birds here, but I just haven't had the time. I don't think you can challenge how good, easy or hard it is, because it's down to split seconds. And it's your ability to get that pigeon to hit that ground in the traditional sense as quick as possible. And if you can't do that, it flies around the sky clapping and gliding because it's come home on a race day like we've all experienced on a normal pigeon race day. You've lost it. You've lost it by a mile. You might as well be in a different race. If you're a second out, you might as well be in a different race. So
it's the 100 meters equivalent. That's what it is.
Exactly. Absolutely right. You don't come out them blocks right, you've had it. You dip too early for the line, you've had it. And who argues that Usain Bolt is not the fastest person in the world? He's the fastest person in the world over 100 meters, but there's no way he's going to do a marathon and beat the fastest person there. Mo Farah, for instance. Nobody argues that they're not great sports. Well, actually, not nobody. People will argue the difference between them, but they don't poo-hoo it.
No.
And yeah, I think, like I say, we're not looking at changing the pigeon sport to do this, to go this route, but we're looking at introducing new people, brand new people to the sport. And you have to think about modern day life. Unless you don't have that as in the forefront of your mind, you are never going to get the numbers we need into this sport. And modern day life doesn't allow for hours on end to be spent at the pigeon loft, weekdays, weekends, whatever. You could say this is easier racing, but you've still got to be able to look after pigeons, keep them well, keep them healthy. You've still got to breed.
Well, you define easier, like we said. You define easier. That's like the sprint guys in the sport. We know it. They care about a pigeon hitting the trap, not flying around. Well, this is that times 100. This is. If that pigeon even came in 90 degrees or whatever, it's lost it. It's all relative. Look. The conversation went along the lines of about the sport, about new beginners. I was talking about my idea of getting a new book collaborated to be done. And then we talked about this. And look, at the end of the day, in modern life, I've talked about this before, guys, right? We are not now living in the 60s and 70s. People haven't got a day spent, let alone 2 days, a Friday to go to Baskerton, a Saturday to sit around waiting. There's a reason that sprint racing is so popular. Sprint racing, as we know it, is so popular, and that is because it takes less time. One of the reasons is, a big reason it takes less time. People haven't got the time to be waiting around for long distance pigeons to come back. So this is that times 100. If you said to somebody new, you can, like James was saying, I should let James do it, but you said if you can race with the best of them, you can race with royalty at 70 miles an hour. I can't remember what else you said, but you had some good hooks on that.
Yeah. I mean, the whole sport. But I mean, I'll just jump in there before I sort of get back to what he's just saying. Then the bit that crossed my mind then is, as a stud, I said to you, I counted up one year how many brand new people to the sport we have come to us in that particular year, and it's fairly similar year on year for the last 3 or 4 years, and it's 40 people. I stopped counting at 40 people as we still had time to go in the year. Okay, that's not very many, you might argue, but the point of this message is the majority of new people that come into the sport and ask to buy pigeons from us, and they want recommendations, it is more of them want sprint pigeons than they do want distance birds. Now, I know you're going to shout me down and say, well, that's because sprinting is potentially easier, but it's not. Sprinting is just as hard as long distance racing, but for different reasons. But the other reason, or the main reason that people coming into the sport want to do sprint, is because they do want it over and done with. They don't want to be waiting 3 days for a pigeon to come from 500 or 600 miles. Okay, again, you could argue that you potentially haven't won the race, but 3 days. But for me, when I was what was I, 10, 11 years old, and I got my hen from Poe, 540 miles, after I got home from school on the 3rd day. I was the only person in the club. That was fantastic. And, you know, life still had to go on. That was on the Monday, so I could have potentially missed that bird. This never happens in this situation. And I truly believe, when I've watched them videos, I can see how exciting that could be, counting them seconds up from 40.
Well, you can imagine now in today's time, you'd have a big digital stopwatch.
Yeah,
for
just
everybody
like
to see.
Yeah.
You can see how it could be audience pleasing and audience participation from a point of view of, you know, it's just got mainstream appeal.
It has, and I mean the thing that fell flat on its face a few years ago before, and I know you've mentioned this before as well about betting within the sport. It's been tried before Ian Evans, and I forget the name of the guy before Ian Evans, but probably for a few reasons. But anyway, he couldn't get mainstream betting interested in pigeon racing is because it took too long. One, they know the attention span of the people betting, and it's short. Two, they couldn't get enough pigeon races in the time that would make it profitable for them. With this, again, if you got them involved in miler racing, it's a huge win for them because the racing's over and done with quickly. Again, they could GPS track them because it could be tracked the whole way, so you could have it sent back, so you could actually see the pigeon live on screen. So you wouldn't even have to be in the same area to see the race happen, but you could see it tracked on screen. I'm not a betting person. I'm not against betting, but you've got the sport is not moving forward. It's still stuck in what you said, the 60s and 70s, and people are gonna shout at me for saying that, but unfortunately it is. I've been in it since, well, I was born into it, but I've been racing since I was 9 years old on my own, and there really hasn't. Yes, it's changed a lot, but not changed a lot in the right way, in the sense of trying to attract people into the sport. And one, if we don't do any, if miler racing wasn't put out there like we've done tonight, I've got one person already interested in the southeast breeding milers from the pigeons that I was gifted, and I've gifted them on to him. So that's one other person with milers. So we're already already increasing the awareness of it. If we can increase the awareness tonight, if it's one more person, then that's one more. And that's how we should look as a sport as overall. We shouldn't just keep poo-hooing things and saying they won't work. Yes, some things aren't going to work, and many things have been tried over the years. But has anybody tried this?
Well, you know, there are a few logistical issues with it to become popular. Yeah. One of them being is a paddock. There's not that many of them around these days. There's not that much land around that could potentially be used. From my understanding, these paddocks used to be in the back of pubs and what have you. That's not necessarily such a viable thing. It could be done still, but at the same time, there's absolutely no reason why it couldn't be done to a few lofts. It couldn't be. There's no reason why it couldn't be done to one loft. Which brings
this was my thing that I said to you. You've got a platform there already for it to do it, which I've already spoken about within schools. You've got a large group of people, young people, already interested in pigeons. You could easily have that one loft and train those birds and have them as a 1 mile race or 5 mile race, or at least no more than 5 miles. but you could make it a family event as well, you know, to, like you say, have the big timer up there and everything else. So you have got a platform there already, but like you say, the difficulty is expanding that to other areas, communities that, you know, and areas that haven't got them already in schools. That is always going to be the problem when you've got animals involved, because you've got to keep animals somewhere, and we can't keep pigeons in a house like you can a dog. So yeah, you've got those drawbacks, but they're the same drawbacks really as any other part of the pigeon racing. You know, you can argue, yes, you can have one loft in a back garden. You can't do this, but actually you could have one loft in a back garden and like I've just had a new customer now, brand new to the sport. He's on an estate and he's seen some pigeons flying over the other side of the estate. That's what's got him interested. Well, he could go around and say to his neighbours, do you want to, you know, either bet on this pigeon or part own this pigeon or something like that within my loft? Like, you know, you could potentially sell pigeons within your loft. They're owned by different people around you, and you all get together on a weekend, or don't have to be a weekend.
There's so many ways of it. A couple of other things is this happened all year round, every weekend, because it is only a mile. The weather wasn't that of an issue. People could own their own pigeon within a loft, which is go along the lines of the community loft ideas I've spoken about, and James and I have spoken about before. The community loft, the schools is an idea, not that you would promote betting within schools, but you will at least first, second, third, fourth prize with certificates and what have you. And then you've got the whole thing of people don't actually even need to own the pigeon. You could have people where you own, you know, Bertie the pigeon, and Bertie's competing in next week's race against these, exactly the same as horse racing, because guess what? Now you've got it down to that mile or 3 mile or 5 mile or whatever, then you've got a massive parallel to horse racing. And with the technology available now, you can have a video cast of each pigeon being released in real time, or all of the pigeons released, whatever combination you could do. You can have it broadcast coming back on the trap or on the spot, whatever you would do. And with ETS, you can have live real-time results coming in. So you don't even, if you're the owner of Bertie, you don't even need to be at the paddock that particular race day. You can see that Bertie's timed in, and you can see when his mate Eric's timed in, and you can see when Joe Bloggs down the road's pigeon's timed in. And what do you know? You've got pigeon sport that equals horse racing.
Yeah, definitely. And again, there's no reason it has to be expensive either, because you could have a syndicate of people own a pigeon, you know, and a family can own a pigeon, for instance, and they would be knowing that they could be racing against another family, either their next door neighbours, or it could be a family, you know, miles away. It doesn't have to be people in the local area. It's just to get effectively a one loft race situation, but all condensed. Everything's condensed. Number of birds, the time it takes for a race to, you know, be over and done with. If there's prize money involved, like I said to you, Mark, over the phone, a lot of the time they weren't actually racing for money, but they were racing for, you know, boxes of meat or whatever back in the day. There could be all sorts of sponsorship if you wanted to, you know, bring sponsorship and money into this side of the sport. I think there are too many pluses about this side of the sport, about introducing new people to the sport, brand new people. Yes, there will be some people within the pigeon racing that perhaps have left the sport because of the hawk issues and may be interested in this because they know that they can get away with only having a few, and obviously they're not going to suffer with the hawk issues so much with this type of racing. That might encourage them, but I'm not saying we go over in swathes to this. This is all about getting people that don't know anything about the sport as it is, you know, involved in it.
As usual, we have mixed reactions on the audience chat, and again, what James said earlier, we're not talking about this replacing pigeon racing. We're talking about it being an add-on to somebody that already does it. but mainly we're talking about bringing new people in. That's the angle we're talking about. So we've had a comment, who wants to prep a racing pigeon all week to race a mile? It's a joke. No, that's not the point. The point is not us talking about you prepping a racing pigeon for a week to race a mile. We're talking about bringing new people in. And there's absolutely no reason why somebody that does this couldn't obviously add this into, add some milers into their loss. We're not talking about, obviously, people can't do it if they're already racing. What we're talking about is the age-old problem of how do you get somebody to set up a loft, get pigeons, get the expense, have the time commitment, go to the club, wait around on a Saturday. All of these things we keep talking about, I've said before many times, you are not going to get the people in the tens of thousands you need. Let's say we had a goal of getting back to the late 80s numbers. That means we need 40,000 new people in the sport. It's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. So this, when James said it, I'm like, there's the answer to this thing I've been looking for. Combine it with community lofts. Combine it with one loft racing. Doesn't have to be as we know it at the moment. It doesn't have to be for the one big prize at the end of the season or at the end of the big race and with a few hot spots. It could be one loft racing on a weekly basis. And your entry fee for that week goes into a pool. And the winner takes first, second, third. And it takes, there's so many options. So we're not talking about it replacing. We're talking about it adding. Then, like I said, with my 3-point plan, prior to learning about miler racing, it was get people interested in one-off races. Then some people will start breeding pigeons to enter one-off races, or contact other people like James to breed some pigeons for them to enter the one-off races. Then a portion of them will come through and start keeping pigeons themselves. Whereas this bringing in now, get them into milers. They can keep a small shed with 10 pigeons in it. It's a lot easier to a proposition to say, all you need is a 6x4 shed with 10 pigeons in it, whatever. Some people won't be able to do that. Okay, there's a miler community loft down there. These birds are available at the moment. You can go and buy the pigeon and it's yours and you're competing every week. The community loft idea. You bring that in. One, the time element is took away with. And two, it's just so much easier. And here's the big thing, to the mainstream media, it's over and done in a minute, just like a horse race. There's the thing. So let's just quickly go through some more comments.
Yeah, I'll just quickly come back to that one comment because I think it'll answer quite a few others actually.
Yeah,
the
go on,
guy
mate.
saying about prepping a pigeon all week for one race, a 1 mile race. Don't most pigeon fanciers, especially on sprint races, go out maybe 10-15 minutes before the bird is due to come home, and 5 minutes after it's due to come home they're looking at their watch thinking, oh, I've lost the race. So how's that any different? If you're doing a 60-mile race, does everybody sit in their garden from the time the pigeon's liberated to the time it actually comes home? I don't think anybody does.
Yeah.
So I don't see. Okay, I can see where they're coming from. It's only a mile, but in terms of what people do now, pigeon fanciers do now, they only go out when on a sprint race when a bird's expected to arrive. Some people wait no more than 10 minutes for their bird. Well, you know, you've prepped your pigeon the whole week for exactly the same.
Very good point, mate. It's like Tom Powers said in reply to Tom Swift. Tom Swift said about preparing numbers for a mile, it's a joke. Tom Powers, who I've got a lot of time for, and it's like Tom said, it's just a different format, Tom. It won't work for everybody, me included. Like, nothing better than getting a pigeon ready and just waiting for the garden for its return. I was just thinking about getting new faces interested in pigeons. Once they know we are here, then they may come and join us. You just don't know. Exactly that. Exactly that. We need, as a sport, as the sport is now, needs a way of people getting engaged. This is a way. Simple as that. And again, no reason why you couldn't have 10 milers in your existing loft to compete as well. No reason why. It's not either or. in addition, it's a lot more chance of people actually potentially in their thousands getting interested in this. What? So pigeons don't only race 1 or 5 or maybe 10 miles. A pigeon can actually fly 3, 4, 500 miles, 600, 700 miles. Wow, that's unbelievable. When they're amazed at seeing a pigeon come back from a mile or 5 miles, then you throw into the mix as part of the education and everything. Yeah, you know what? These pigeons fly 500 miles. That's when you start blowing them away. That's when you get people interested, because they've had the thrill of seeing a pigeon come back from a race. It doesn't matter if it's from a mile and you're competing within milliseconds. It's getting people to get that thrill, then get the experience, then who knows how many people could get in. So again, we're not talking about it replacing. Listen, when I start keeping pigeons, my personal ones, Andy's into the sprint. I love the long distance. I love the fact that you can send a pigeon 500, 600, 700 miles and it will come back to you. I love that. But just because I love long distance doesn't mean I wouldn't equally want to participate in a mile race, because that's a different ball game, that is. You know, and it's just different, isn't it? And again, some people
I mean, what you've said there as well actually fits exactly what I've said earlier. The people that we have brand new coming into the sport and asking us to buy pigeons from us, I'll try sprint racing first, see how I get on, and then I might go, once I've learnt the ropes effectively, I might move on to distance racing. Depends on my situation and how I feel with the sport. This is exactly the same platform, but on a shorter scale in terms of distance, but a smaller scale in terms of what you need to keep. So there's less investment required as well. So that it's about introducing the people in the very first place to pigeon racing. I don't think it makes a blind bit of difference how far a pigeon race is to them in that first instance. Like you say, once they get the taste of that pigeon coming home and seeing it come bang online, going as fast as it possibly can, and in this situation hitting the floor, or in our situation hitting the trap, that's the buzz. Nobody gets the buzz of the pigeon. Who thinks about the pigeon flying if it's liberated from 90 mile away? Who thinks of it flying over the hills of Dartmoor or Bodmin Moor and thinking, wow, you know? The wow bit is when it's at home.
Exactly.
Not the journey. Not the journey. The distance racing, I love distance racing as well. I haven't got the time for it, unfortunately, or the space here. And the distance racing has got a different aspect to the sprint racing, but that's why the sport is so great. There are so many different aspects. We're just talking about racing, and like I say, we need to think of the sport as a whole with fancy birds as well, because as soon as you get people interested in, that's a pigeon, not this thing that's walking around in the street with a toe missing and wing hanging down. You know, we've got to get the people involved in the sport, and it doesn't really matter how, as long as it's in a positive way and they get that bug. And the people that have come back to us, I've got a 51-year-old fancier wanted to start racing again. He last raced when he was 12-year-old, and it's because he's had that first experience as a young person racing pigeons, getting that excitement, and now he's got
I've completely lost my train of thought. This is the trouble when you're monitoring comments as well. The idea with, that's where I was going. The idea that they were into the middle of the paddock, that doesn't necessarily have to be the case now. A lot of people would say that's open to issues or whatever. It could be into, everybody goes into a trap, and with not a lot of work. You see, at the moment, the historic miler racing was single pigeons. It could be they all come up together. You could have different varieties. You could have singles. You could have groups. The sky's the limit with this, but with not a lot. Sorry, go on, James.
Yeah, it just crossed my mind. What about team racing? You could have individuals as a team, so a 3-team event, like a 4x4. You know, like a 100-meter relay, a 4x4. So you could have a team of 4 pigeons, like you say, all liberated together, so that the whole paddock was, you know, racing together. But you had teams within them paddocks, and it's the first, you know, the top top team that wins. There are so many things that you could do with this. Yes, you can say you can do with it with the sport as it is now, but it's the time. It's the time that's been taken out of this factor, which the time factor has been taken out of the sport as it is for the modern day life. Your comments, like I say, I run through a few of those because it'd be interesting to see what people are more the negative ones, because it would be interesting to see if they're all on the same vein, which I think they probably are, because the only negatives really are from pigeon fanciers looking at this from the pigeon fanciers' point of view. They're not looking at it from a non-pigeon fancier's point of view.
No, absolutely. Let's read through some comments now. I'm just trying to sort my cameras out. Happy days. My main camera seems to have frozen. Just give me a second. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. No, don't want that. 1 second, we will get there. Don't want me as the main camera. 1 second, guys. Now we're going to have just James, so you don't have to see me at all. So some of the comments we've got in, I will scroll through a lot. A little bit too early there. Stephen O'Brien, yes, you guessed who the guest was many minutes ago now, Stephen. I'm glad that from my glowing description of them without mentioning their name, you guessed who I was talking about, though. That says a lot, mate. Darren Aitken says he was thinking the same. Great to see you, James, and congratulations on all your success. The National Winners love following your videos. That's obviously
keep with those comments. Let's not bother with any of the others.
I've got a comment here. Do you adapt to the Leon Bohr system now you have them, mate?
Now I have them. I've had them before I was in the
You were
sport.
born, yeah.
Yeah, the studs had them since 1982. I was born in 1979. The Leon Bohrs have been crossed with the milers and have performed in the very limited racing they've done very well. That's all I'll say. This is not about promoting me or this.
I know it's not, but you know what? People are asking the question, so I have no issue in people knowing about what you do, because like I said, I love what you do. You run a family stud. It's your life's passion and your family's passion, and that's it. Another question, asking Mark, the Van Reets that Dean Pallett said were brainwashed into 100-mile sprints and without knowing, became the best sprint birds around. Does he think a miler can be a new source of sprinters? I think it's probably the other way around.
It's interesting, actually. I'd be very tempted to, like I say, I've got milers here. I just haven't had the time to do anything with them. But one, I would love to do some miler racing and see how it would work, especially out here with different scenario to where most places are. But also, I'd love to try them at more than a mile. I mean, basically the chap that I got them from, I've said tonight to him that I'll be on here. I'm not going to mention his name because I can, but I'm not sure if he would want me to or not. I don't think it really matters, but I'll keep it quiet for now. But he had a pigeon that went 90 mile away, and he said, well, blimey, it's only supposed to be a miler. Okay, that was after a hawk attack or something like that, but just because they can race a mile doesn't mean they can't do further. The same as a sprint pigeon, a racing sprint pigeon. Just because it's designed and does its best at 100 mile or 90 mile doesn't mean it can't fly 500 miles, but it's getting the best out of the tools that you've got. Yeah, I don't know. It'd be interesting to see what they would do. And again, if they were crossed, then the same as crossing any families now. You change that pigeon in a particular way, and you change it hopefully when people are crossing these days, they're changing it to get the benefit of the cross. So is that adding more speed or more stamina to a particular bird? In this scenario, hopefully it'd be adding more speed. I don't know. It may be. The problem is there are so few birds out there, as far as I've been told when I asked my friend.
You did say there was an association still with rings and everything.
Yeah. All the birds are rung that I've got. Ones I breed myself wouldn't have the association rings on because I'm not a member. But yes, you can yeah, be part of the. I don't know what. Sorry, I don't actually know what the association's name is. Like I said, I'm no expert on this subject whatsoever, and there are better people out there than that than me to talk about milers. But I'm just pleased that people out there will have learned something tonight, really, at the end of the day, whether they're interested or not, as long as they've heard the word, perhaps the word will get round.
Exactly, exactly. Like I said, I'd never heard of it or anything. Daz Buxton said, Dad's Barton, just give a few more comments before we wrap it up. I travelled up to Yorkshire a few years ago and watched this paddock was behind a pub. What a cracking day, and the lads educated me a lot about milers. Jack Berry said miler racing was very popular back in the day.
It fell apart when the mines all closed. That was the downfall.
One of the things was, why did it go away? Obviously, it wasn't very popular then. Well, like we said earlier, it was all down with the miners, so that's why that went down.
Yeah, that's it. It wasn't due to popularity. It was very popular. It's just that the mines were closed down, and as they closed, obviously communities and everything fell apart. So the miler racing did at the same time. And as pubs closed, obviously that was the main source of their. Most pubs had, gardens in them days, or back gardens, whatever you call them. Plenty of space for a few lofts and that. But as they've got closed and pubs are not so prolific these days, it's just become more and more difficult from the point of view. But and okay, that is a problem to be able to put this, into the wider community, but actually you just need a bit of land, and it doesn't have to be very big, no more than any other back garden Pigeon Fancy has got. So it's got no more restrictions in that respect. We just need to look at it in a slightly different way than the traditional sense, but try and keep the traditional ways alive, which we all like to do. We all like to look back, past traditions, but we've got to modernise them at the same time.
I said to Gabby a couple of days ago after I spoke to you, I said, it reminds me of my school fete when I was about 14. And I took 12 pigeons along, put them in boxes that I'd spent all day making the day before, put little plastic wood hood fronts on them with the doors on. And we did a charity pigeon race. And essentially, crow flies, it would have been at the time, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 mile. People were absolutely fascinated. The Lord Mayor won the race, as it happened. Reminds me of that. Well,
we done exactly the same down here at a fete, and they all got to hold the pigeons, and some people liberated them all at the same time. We timed them into our place, and they all paid £1 per bird to, which one was going to be the winner. And I don't know, it wasn't somebody notable, but like your situation.
Exactly, yeah. And that's what it's about. It's about exposure, isn't it? Mate, I said to you when I asked you to come on the show, it'd be about 20 minutes. Well, it's not. It's been an hour. That's how these things seem to go. But I think it's fascinating. I think it's a great way of being able to get people interested. I'm going to find out about the association, or James is between us. We're going to find out because I want to speak to him. I want to see what's going on and what can be done. Don't discount it, folks. Right? Watching this is RPI Live Racing Pigeon International. Well, one international is, do milers work anywhere else? Do people outside of the UK do it? And at the end of the day, whether a racing pigeon race is 1 mile or 600 mile, it's still a race. So don't discount it. Again, we're not talking about replacing. We're talking about bringing in and bringing new people in and getting that interest in there. So, James, I want to say thank you, mate. Thank you for the over an hour you've given up time. You're more of an expert than I am, and it's been fascinating, and thank you.
No problem at all. Pleasure.
Thanks, mate. So there you go. James Cook from Tomley Lost talking about milers. And like I said, I got a lot of time for James. Like I said, I don't really know him that well, if I'm honest, but I like him a lot. Good, decent family who are all in on the business. His wife helps, his children help. nice guy. And again, I've never heard about it. I'm going to read some more comments. I said going back to school should be approached. This is Anthony Bracken with a plan to build and keep and maintain a loft, and each school should race not only in the feds but also against each other's school. Absolutely, Anthony, that's what should happen. It's a way going forward for the younger generation. If my bird came in after 50 seconds, I don't think I'd be happy. I get the way they would be trained different and different kind of race, but 1 minute or 10 minutes takes the fun out of prepping and training. Enjoy the wait. I get that, mate. I get what you're saying, but again, we're not talking about replacing. We're talking about adding and moving in to get as many people interested. You get people interested in this, like I said earlier. What? A pigeon can fly 500 miles or 200 miles. Wow, that will blow people's minds once they've seen that pigeon hit the trap from a mile or 5 or whatever. David Penrose, schools be good, groups of kids could have their own bird. Exactly, parents would get interested, absolutely. Molly Dolman, yes, I did. Mark, did you race pigeons in the past? I did when I was a kid. I haven't since. I haven't raced in 29 years. Excuse me, but I did race in my local club, the Markfield Club in Leicestershire. As a kid, I haven't raced since. So very different times, I know now. But yeah, I did. What else have we got? Stephen Morgan says it sounds like an ideal starting point for young kids because they get low patience for most things, especially sitting around and waiting for hours. They want action straight away no matter what. So miler race is done and dusted in quick time. Sounds like an idea for children. Quick buzz. I think I completely agree, but I think it attracts far more people than just children. Or it could do anyway. Tony Hughes, how are you? I'm well, thank you, Tony. Let's see who else we've got comments. We've got a lot of comments in the RPI group today. Thank you for that. Lorraine Butler, wouldn't you do loft manage? It depends how you did it. You know, there's that many different ways to do it. I'm going to look at this association and see how I can find it. But yeah, look, different way of looking at it. Like I said at the beginning of the program, the biggest problem in a one loft race situation when I've been covering them is that gap in between. You could do these miler races at that gap in between to get mainstream media, potentially hundreds of thousands or millions potentially of people watching this. What does it matter? It's not what we are used to, but it's different, you know? Let's see what else we've got before we wrap the show up. I was in Molly Dolman. I was in the Markfield Flying Club. Markfield in Leicestershire. It's no longer there now. Markfield's a little place just off the M1 going towards Leicester. I was in that club. It was a club. It was a shipping container or a porter cabin at the back of a pub on the main street in Markfield many years ago. So 32 years ago when I was part of that club. So yeah. Thank you for watching, folks. As I say, I think it's been another interesting show. I love James for his down-to-earth nature and open ideas. That's what it's about. It's about having open ideas as to how we're going to turn this round. And that's what's needed. Quick shout-outs. Richard Chambers, Flying Back to Pigeons initiative, has now got 16 clubs involved, which, considering 2 weeks ago he only had 5, is a significant increase. Let's see if we can get him up to 20 clubs as soon as possible. If you look in on the RPRA site, Flying Back to Pigeons, the initiative to get adults back into the sport, that's what Richard needs to do. He's got 16 clubs. Let's help him get it up to 20. Lots more to talk about, but we've run out of time. Very quickly, Walker's Transport. Somebody has been, I haven't personally been in touch with Mark, but somebody's been in touch with Mark, spoke to him today, and he confirms that pickups will start early May. It's either 4th, 5th or 6th of May from Ireland. Third-party information. I hadn't had a chance to speak to Mark myself, but I've been assured by somebody that asked me to mention it on the show that Walkers is due to be starting to pick up pigeons the first week of May. So that's good news for all the Irish guys looking to get pigeons backward and forward. And it's good news for all of the pigeons that are waiting to go to different flyers from and to the UK. Sean Hunt's race as well. It's all good as well for everybody concerned. I know Mark's been very busy within the UK, but now Ireland will be opening back up, all being well, beginning of May. That's good news for everybody. I was speaking to James from Tumley Lofts about a starter book, asking people to potentially, would people be up for collaborating on a book and putting content into a book at specific areas of their expertise. For instance, James would be breeding, somebody else would be health, racing, loft management, all the different things, health and supplements. I still think there needs to be a book for new starters, a how-to guide that you can go and buy on Amazon if you're interested in racing pigeons. That's something we need to be looking at, and it's something that I'm going to be talking about a little more down the line. What else have we got on the comments before we finish it up? Excuse my lighting, excuse my separate angle. My main camera for some reason has frozen. The World of Rocco says, I had milers up until last year from a guy in Barnsley. You're on YouTube. Could you message me? I would like to speak to you. We need to find people that have got these miler pigeons. I want to speak to them. I want to talk to them more. So if you would mind messaging me, Mark at racingpigeoninternational.com, or if you've got me on Facebook, hit me up there as well, please. Peter Curran, doesn't need to be one race a week, could be one race every day and have it in the evening when everybody's at home from work. Absolutely. So many different angles on this. Thank you, guys. It's 20 past 9, so we've gone on an hour and 20 minutes, but I think it was worth it. Again, a heartfelt thank you to everybody that's offered Gabby, Zandy, and myself support this week. It means a great deal. It's been a challenging week, to say the least. It's something that hurts in many ways. Seeing your work being used and not being paid for it, having all of the fallout with the car situation, which is still ongoing with police. The insurance company, weirdly, have been very good. Insurance companies seem to have booked their ideas up. But the comments, the text messages we've been getting, and the phone calls I've received from pigeon flyers, from non-pigeon flyers, it means a great deal. And thank you from myself, Gabby, and Zandy as well. It means a great deal. And we carry on. And like I said at the beginning of the show, for people that haven't seen it, despite the rumours, I'm going nowhere. RPI and RPI Live TV is going nowhere. We are here 8 o'clock Mondays, almost every week, apart from if for any reason I can't make it, we are here. We are going to get bigger and better, and we're going to be talking about whatever we want to talk about. If you want to be a guest on the show, let me know. But despite what rumours I've heard this week, I'm going nowhere. I'm here, and I'm here to do what I want to do. And all of the supporters I've got, the numbers of people watching are amazing, and we're growing week on week. Thank you again. It really does mean a lot. I'll leave it at that. I hope you are coping with lockdown. These things will pass, and time will tell, and we will get back to normal. Keep with it. Next week, I'm going to talk about fancy pigeons and how they can get people interested in racing as well. And we will hopefully have another guest on as well. In the meantime, thank you very much. Catch you next week. Be lucky, keep safe, and keep flying.